Today, former staffers from the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton's campaign are launching a new advocacy group for Democrats, focusing on national security and foreign policy issues aimed at taking on the Trump administration in the midterms and beyond. The project is called National Security Action. It is co-chaired by Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor in the Obama White House, and Jake Sullivan, former Senior Policy Advisor for Hillary Clinton's campaign, former National Security Advisor to Vice President Joe Biden. They both join me now. Welcome, both. Well, Ben, what makes you think that voters are going to care about foreign policy? They're happy, apparently, with the tax cut, which is becoming increasingly popular. The economy seems to be okay, short term at least. So for 2018, barring any catastrophic events on the economic domestic side, things seem to be going along quite well.
Well, there are some basic things that people care about. They don't want the President of the United States to be reckless and risk getting us into catastrophic wars like we've seen potentially with North Korea. They don't like an escalation of military conflict that they're not even necessarily being told about, which is what we see across the Middle East. They certainly don't like the corruption. And one of the things that we want to lift up is that Trump went around the country saying he'd stand up to other countries. We see a blending of personal and financial interests with what should be the national interest in a lot of foreign policy issues. And we also see, I think voters want the President of the United States to represent them around the world. They want to be proud of that. Right now, that's an embarrassment to the United States. And so we want to make the case that not only is Trump not fit for the office and needs a greater check in Congress, but there's an affirmative view of how America leads in the world, how we keep us safe, that there needs to be an organized collective going out and making that case, and that's why we built this organization.
Jake, Joseph Yun, who was the chief negotiator on North Korean issues, is stepping down. He's retiring, an experienced diplomat and negotiator. We've seen a hollowing out of the State Department. We've seen the Secretary of State negotiating with Erdogan recently without a translator, using the Turkish foreign minister to be his translator, not properly staffed by the State Department. People don't seem to care. How do you make people care? Republicans as well as Democrats care about what's happening in foreign policy.
Well, I think Trump's own Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, put it well. If you start cutting diplomats, if you start driving them in droves out of the State Department, then Jim Mattis is going to have to spend more money on bullets and guns. It's more likely that we're going to end up at war, more likely that we'll end up at war on the Korean Peninsula, more likely that we're going to have to escalate military involvement in the Middle East, more likely that we could stumble into a conflict with Iran. And all of those are things that we believe voters will care about as we go forward. They don't want to see the commander-in-chief recklessly putting us at risk of war and not investing in the kind of diplomacy that leads to America being respected and secure around the world.
And decisions such as Jerusalem being the capital of Israel, which has congressional support, but no other president has ever taken that step. And now on May 14th, they are going to open the embassy, a sort of token small opening in Jerusalem, to make that point, drive it home, and also are zeroing out Palestinian UN refugee aid.
And look, Democrats have been strong supporters of Israel and Israel's security. What we see in this announcement is it's attached to no strategy. And frankly, I worry that it's going to make Israel less safe. If you're stirring the pot in the Middle East, if you're doing something dramatic on a final status issue like Jerusalem, without a clear strategy, without something that you can articulate, we're isolated in the world. They threatened other countries not to vote with us at the UN. They all did anyway. So they're not getting any return on these policies that they're pursuing. And I do think, Andrew, you asked about voters. They often seize on issues that they think are going to be a political advantage to them. Frankly, that's something that needs to be countered. We see this in the immigration debate. MS-13 is being treated as a national security issue, when in fact what they're doing in undermining the FBI with the attacks on our law enforcement community, the immigration approach that fails to separate out criminals like MS-13 from dreamers, that is all making us less safe. So whether it's Jerusalem or immigration or these other issues where they're going to try to drive wedges, we need to marshal the arguments against what Trump is doing that is making us less safe and less respected.
And Jake, with all due respect, Hillary Clinton campaigned on that. One of her fundamental issues from the San Diego speech on was that this man, Donald Trump, is not prepared to be commander-in-chief, trying to frighten people about his ability to have the nuclear button. Now he's bragging that his button is bigger than Kim Jong-un's.
Right. Well, I think we have to learn the lessons from 2016, but we also have to recognize that voters, when they went into the voting booth, were concerned as one of their considerations about Donald Trump acting recklessly. And now we've got more than a year's worth of evidence to suggest that those fears are justified, that Donald Trump is out there on Twitter goading a dictator in another country country potentially into a war as we go forward. So I don't think that this is something that voters sleep easily at night with Donald Trump as commander-in-chief. And the other thing that I would add is that we now have global surveys that suggest China's leadership is more respected than America's leadership. If there's one thing that Americans care about, it's that people look at us and see inspiration and don't look at China and see that's the place we want to go for the future. So from my perspective, we have a chance to make the case heading into 2018, both about the fundamental questions of security, but also about who we are as a country and how we are seen and respected around the world.